Hey everyone, Eddy Salas here, and welcome back to the Price Point. Let's face it, right now, everyone's looking to tightening budgets, trying to find that non-essential spend and see where they can actually find savings. And one of the first places that they question, competitive intelligence budgets. Do we really need all that data? Can't we just focus in on internally for now? These are some of the questions that we're starting to hear more and more out there in the marketplace. Today, I want to make the case that cutting your competitive intelligence spend isn't just risky, it's a strategically dangerous move. So let's take a look at 5 different reasons for this. Point one, your competitors aren't slowing down, so you risk falling behind. So just because you're cutting back your visibility in the competition doesn't mean that they're cutting back their visibility into you. So one of the first things that we hear is, "Hey, let's go ahead and start, removing long tail visibility and focus in on key value items or key critical items." Well, there's a couple of challenges with that. Your long tail tends to be where you actually can find a lot of your dollars, but if you lose that respective visibility, you lose a lot more risk, not just on the financial side, but even on the price image side. So what happens if you do curtail your your competitive intelligence spend and reduce it just to key value items? Well, let's say competition has some of those long tail items that are priced higher than you are. Well, if they see that you're not necessarily moving, you potentially run the risk of actually bringing them back down, so you lost in that margin opportunity. But really, where the big risk is going to be is what happens if they're underpriced from you, and they decide to they're acceptable with that particular margin, and they're just starting to eat away from your price image, right? So you've got to be careful when you take a look at curtailing from that particular perspective, because it could either be a margin risk or it could be a price image risk. Point two, without external signals, you start to look inward, right? So if you lose outside perspective, decisions become more of a closed loop. So without those competitive benchmarks, your pricing, your promotions, and even some of your assortment decisions are just based solely on your internal metrics, your sales, your margins, your forecasts. You're running completely blind in terms of what competition could be doing. Are they changing their pack sizes? Are they starting to expand? Are they starting to shift their private label? Are they trying different promotional depths? Without that competitive intelligence, you're flying blind against moves that shape customer expectations. You also lose the ability to respond quickly, right? The advantage of competitive intelligence is it gives you that insight that you can respond, fairly rapidly to any changing decisions going on. Responsiveness is one of the real strengths of competitive intelligence. Imagine your biggest competitor slashes prices on a core category during a holiday weekend. If you're only gathering the data monthly or only on targeted items, you're now playing reactive, and really before you realize it, they potentially have stolen share, they potentially reset the floor. You're scrambling, you're trying to get ahead of that. CI gives you the power to pivot in the moment, not necessarily weeks later, or even worse, when customer makes a decision with their respective basket. Another point is you miss strategic shifts, and it's not just pricing moves. We've talked about this before on the price point. Competitive intelligence goes far beyond just pricing information. It definitely talks about promotional depths and promotional strategies. It also helps to understand what's going on from an assortment point of view. We talked a little bit, a couple of slides ago to talk about, what's actually shifting. Are they expanding the private label or not? Are they launching sustainability claims? Are they going more direct to customer channels? These signals tell you the market is changing, not where it's been. Without them, you're always one step behind. And the last point, you undermine future innovation and planning. Competitive intelligence, in my opinion, essentially provides a strong backbone and foundation for really what the future is going to be able to hold, right? It's whether you're designing a new assortment, you're trying to plan pricing tests or reshaping promo strategy, you need that competitive context to be able to make those smart moves. Without it, you're guessing, and you don't know. You miss out on a rich data set in terms of what's going on from a trending perspective. Did they accelerate retails? Did they accelerate increasing retails? Did promotions accelerate? By cutting whether the time frame in terms of your how you collect it, or even worse, even the items, um, like I said, it becomes extremely challenging to be able to manage pricing at the end of the day. So in tough times, it's tempting to cut back on things that don't show immediate ROI. But pricers, we know that pricing isn't necessarily immediate. There's only a few items that really make immediate change. Most of your items, it's going to take time before you see any type of customer shifts or demand shifts, right? You've got to be able to play that long game. Competitive intelligence isn't a cost center. In my opinion, it's not, it's a resilience builder, but it's also a profit generator. It keeps you sharp, adaptable, and informed when your competitions are still moving fast. So before you cut, ask yourself, can you really afford to go dark in a market that's still moving? So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight in terms of, all these saving strategies and the conversations that are going on. Stay ahead of the competition. Understand that it's counterintuitive. The competitive intelligence, the more spend you actually put, the bigger the ROI you're going to be able to get, not only from a pricing perspective, from a promotion perspective, from an assortment perspective, right? You want to be able to understand that long tail. Key value items, critical items, everyone's priced fairly close to one another. So your margin opportunities on those are very, very minimal. Those are more price image risk if you to be able to understand those. But those are very few and far between. Those aren't that many items. When you start taking a look at the long tail, that's really where you're going to start getting a lot of your margin opportunities and also your price image risks. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you here in another 2 weeks for the next episode of The Price Point.